just recorded the whole thing.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Mike Wickers. I'm the mayor of Cottonwood Heights. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025, and this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. So we'll start our meeting today with item number 2, which is a review of our business meeting for this evening. Jared, can I ask you to do the pledge?
You bet.
Thanks. You'll notice item 3 as consideration of proclamation 2025-02 proclaiming Public Works Week. Matt, I don't know where you got that one. No, have we done this before?
This is our first time.
First time.
We haven't felt like celebrating in a mobile home, so.
They just made this up.
This is a national,
It's a national deal. Well, good. I think it's even more relevant. with
And,
our-
when you're done with the proclamation, Ben has a little presentation he'd like to do at the end of reading the proclamation.
Oh, okay.
If you don't
Wanna
mind.
dance?
He will be dancing.
Good.
So Ben, when I'm done, I'll call you up. That work?
Anytime.
Okay, perfect. So we'll have a citizen comment period is item 4, and then we have 9 action items. So we'll start with item 5.1, consideration of ordinance 438, amendment section 10.64.030 of the Cottonwood Heights Code concerning discharge of weapons within the city. Chief,
I got this. Yeah.
yeah, do you want to add? Do you want to?
Sure. So the current ordinance doesn't address anything but firearms. So it doesn't handle bows and arrows or airsoft guns and things of that nature. We've had calls down at Crestwood Park in District 1 and District 4. They go up in the foothills and they'll shoot those things. And we've had dead animals and so forth. When the officers respond, they're limited in what action they can take because unless it's a gun, it's not prohibited. So we asked Shane and we gave him some model language from other cities and this is what we came up with. And it prohibits air guns, bows and arrows, and anything that discharges a projectile from being used up there with exception of self-defense or lawful defense of property. You can also, in this ordinance, it allows you to have a, you can set up like haystacks, for instance, and you have a safe zone. So the archery people like to do that sometimes in their backyard or whatever. And under this ordinance, that's acceptable. It's also acceptable to, obviously a licensed shooting gallery. And it specifically carves out that nothing in this ordinance prohibits kids from going to the park with toys. So that a violation is a Class B misdemeanor, not an infraction. And we wanted it that way because it's can be dangerous.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a tool that we need and the citizens have asked us to do it, so we'd like to support it.
Questions or comments from the council?
Sounds helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah.
Next item for tonight will be item 5.2, consideration of resolution 2025-28, approving entry into an interlocal agreement with Cottonwood Heights Parks and Rec, the service area for landscaping, maintenance, park management, and event coordination. This is obviously something that we do. I think these are 3-year
I
contracts.
was looking, I think it's a 3-year contract. It expires this year, so we have to renew this
Yeah.
for July 1st.
So only 3 of us would have done the last one. But anyway, so we do this every 3 years and the rec center does a great job for us. And,
I have a question.
Sure.
In the contract, it says service area may retain all revenue generated from their programming of third-party events and rentals in and of the parks, provided the service area shall provide city an annual accounting of such revenue. So 2 questions with that. Can you give an example of what they would be doing in our parks that would generate revenue? And do we get that accounting?
Yeah, so I asked for that this year, and Ben sent me a report for the last 2 years. The total in 2024 was about $20,000. The total in 2023 was about
It's
17,000.
negligible.
And it's for the pavilions, for the fields, things like that. So they're managing all that for us, or I guess for them. But
Pavilion rental.
Oh.
Would some of the city-based activities, the Easter egg hunt and those type of things, but I guess that's not in our part.
Yeah,
That's
that's-
reciprocal then, because we do Butlerville Days and we keep our revenue, and so
Right.
if they do something in our parks, they keep it.
Yeah, and it's a negligible amount. It's not a a large, because that's what I asked for. I wanted to know how much was coming out and how much they were making on it. It's
A good question.
All right, thank you.
good question though.
Any other comments?
I had one, and I know that with our council member Highland being the liaison to CH2. You may recall last summer, you and I spoke about the kind of standards. There's a name within that field of, within the area of park maintenance and management. And actually Mayor Peterson had shared with me that normally there are, again, these certain standards related to things like watering the lawns and because there were a number of my constituents had some real concerns last summer related to Golden Hills Park, and various things. So I just wondered if that ever came up in your experience at the meetings, with use of a kind of a nationally recognized standard for.
No.
No, okay.
We talk more about sometimes the damage, Butlerville days and how it's repaired and cost is shared, but standards for watering is not.
I mean, especially as we come into this ongoing drought, you could say, so I'll talk to Mayor Peterson, and I'm not gonna take any issue with this contract that we've reviewed, but I get that from certain constituents that they have concerns about
How,
either not enough watering or over watering and some of that management. I just wonder, if that could be an area that they tighten up or come to certain standards. That's just my one comment, because overall, I'm thrilled about our parks and.
I'll bring it up to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5.3, consideration of resolution 2025-29, approving an easement with Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy, the Conduit Connection Project. So, Matt, do you want to discuss that, Jared, or Matt, or?
I'm sorry.
Okay, Jared.
This is the easement for their new water line they're putting in. This crosses into the right of way on Danish Road there. There's an exhibit in the packet that shows kind of where that's coming. And so this is just an agreement to be within the right of way for that new water line.
It seemed pretty boilerplate because it was talking about how we have the right to remove our swing set equipment and our trampoline.
Yeah.
And there are no
So they-
trampolines or swing sets.
Yeah,
on
it's
the
pretty
property.
boilerplate. They're actually doing this throughout as they do this new water line because the old easement agreement was pretty vague
Okay.
and contestable. And so
Okay.
they're trying to be more specific in their new agreements as they go through and do this water line.
Just a sliver, right, that they're,
Yeah, through the right of way there. The rest of it, they actually own that property as you go up Danish to the east of it, they own that property up there as it goes through, but this touches into
my property
Danish
is divided
right
for
away
that
now.
money.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Well, my only comment on this was that I was hoping that if we had to deal with Salt Lake Water Metro carving through our District 4 area, that there would be a way, especially as it pertains to Danish and the work we're trying to do to slow the traffic on Danish Road, especially coming into the narrow sections that are so dangerous. But I think after we walk the roadway, which you agree, Jared, that this part of their right of way, where they're gonna affect our city-owned roadway, our right of way, is too far south to really dampen the traffic
Traffic,
speeds.
And I don't know that we can require them per state law to actually do anything since they're a utility within the right of way.
Well, I'm just thinking if they
Yeah.
are ripping everything
Yeah, if
up,
they were,
would
I
it
don't
be an
know how much they're tearing
opportunity to
up, though.
look for?
They're not tearing up enough to do any kind of
do much
changes.
on the road.
It would be upwards. A lot of dollars for the city to do what you're asking.
Yeah, if they were rebuilding a large enough section, then we can talk about some improvements. And possibly roll that in and make some betterments, I guess, would be the right term.
But again, it's
It's south
closer to
of-
Alta Hills Road,
Right.
not really up
Right.
near Daneborg or any of that,
Right.
so, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, the next item is similar, consideration of resolution 2025-30, approving a blow off or a discharge agreement with Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy. Do you want to go over this one too as well, or?
Yeah, they've got 5 sites within the city that they actually discharge once in a while to clean out the system, right, Matt? I think,
Yeah,
the blow off, and so.
yeah, it's a blow off. They already do it. It's just
This
changing
is-
the location,
Yeah, and this is to allow them to go into the storm, into our actual storm drain in the 4 of those locations, right?
which they already do. Just FYI, we're just changing the locations of
Okay.
those.
Do we know where those are?
We do, and if you're asking me off the top of my head, I could not tell
The
you.
addresses are in the contract.
I
just
can't believe we
remember.
don't know that.
It is just not one of those things. that's
You didn't
off the
map
top
them
of my
out, put them out for us.
I can ask Ben to come up and tell you where they are.
It's okay.
But you
It's
would-
okay.
That's practically over there listed.
I didn't see the addresses of the new ones. I saw the address of the old ones. It was just like
Sure.
170.170 or whatever.
This is just,
It doesn't matter.
this is just updating the agreement, and we've worked with them on the flows and the times. It's typical and normal.
I imagine the new locations, we've made sure the infrastructure is good.
Yes, and they're working with us on.
Just trying to remember, I thought they were in there, maybe they're not. Maybe it's the
No,
old ones that I
it's-
saw.
Like I said, it's pretty standard. Nothing different, nothing new.
Oh, yeah, it's station 1895 plus 20.
Yeah.
You don't know where that's at?
Because I was trying to look it up.
Big Cotton Creek.
I don't even
the
think Ben would
Canyon
know.
Drive.
Okay, item 5.5, consideration of resolution 2025-31, approving appointment to the historic. Jared.
Yeah, so Ann and Barbara and I interviewed several people for the historic committee. We've got 3 that we'd like to recommend to appoint. One is Maria Crowder. She lives in District 1. She actually is I'll just read what she said because it was really, she's passionate about storytelling and preserving the past. She's actually a great granddaughter of Silas Richard, who was a key pioneer here, and she actually lives just a few hundred feet from his grave, she figured out. So she's got a lot of interest in history. She's actually got a degree in film photography, talking about scanning archival material. She's interested in helping with that too, so. She'll be really good. The second one is Daniel McIntosh, who's lived here for, I think, over 70 years in his neighborhood.
I think everybody
Yeah,
knows.
he nods, so everybody knows
He's
that.
on CHBA, right?
So yes,
Everybody
yes,
knows
Daniel
that.
is awesome. So he's interested in serving on this committee as well.
He's awesome. Go.
And then we've got Stephen Walker, who's a dentist, but also a long-time resident, so he's interested
Peter
in,
Walker, what district? Excuse me?
he's in District 3. He's up off of Millstone Lane.
Dan is 1, right?
Dan is 2.
Two. And Maria, do we know?
Marie's in District 1.
Great. Any other comments? I'm grateful for these people willing to serve. Item 5.6, consideration of resolution 2025-32. Approving an event proposal contract with Custom Events Inc. for the 2025 Butler Road Daisies, the blow ups, right?
Mhm.
So we do this every year. It is just the same vendor.
Same
Yes,
vendor.
Same vendor. Okay, great. I looked at you, Chief. I don't know why. Didn't know that.
Does that remind you of a circus clown?
One of the few that has a number of inflatables to bring. I think they're bringing the climbing wall again and some other things.
Great. Questions, comments? Okay. Item 5.7, consideration of resolution 2025-33, which is the adopting of our tentative budget for the period of July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. So this also will provide for public inspection of our budget. It'll be posted, establishing the time and place of a public hearing, which will be the following meeting. Correct? No, the first meeting in June.
Oh, yeah.
First meeting in June.
Yeah.
And then establishing time and place, and then also providing for public notice of that hearing. So that's what this resolution does. Any other questions or comments about this?
And we'll be going over that.
Yeah, this is a staff item, so we'll go through that this week. Go back to our staff reports. Okay, item 5.8, consideration of resolution 2025-34. Approving appointments to the Health in the Heights Advisory Committee. Jared.
So we've got 2 here. One is a resident, Lauren Black. She lives in District 2. She is, just trying to remember, these were done a couple weeks ago, so I'm trying to remember everybody that we interviewed. But she's been involved a lot in environmental health and safety in her career. And so she saw this, she was just looking for opportunities to volunteer, went to our website, found Health in the Heights, said, hey, that looks good.
What are we down? are we at 22, additional,
I think-
sorry, there was already notes on. So 5.0, thanks, Sean, consideration of resolution 2025-35, appointing a representative to the South Salt Lake Valley Mosquito Abatement District. And so the abatement district requires a resolution to appoint a new board member. And we've asked Councilmember Ellen Burrell if she would fulfill that appointment, and she has agreed. And so this resolution is approving this new appointment of the Mosquito Abatement District. Questions, comments on that? Okay. And then the consent calendar approval of our notes.
I just counted you right, it's 21.
21, okay. Right. We will move on to item 3, which is our staff reports. We have 5 to discuss today. And we're gonna start with our fiscal year 26 tentative budget discussion. So we're gonna turn the time over to our finance director, Scott Churchill. Run us through his line items, and we'll make some decisions on some key items as well. Great.
All right, so, pardon me, so as I would, one just kind of comment before we start, I would recommend that we probably adopt the budget as it is like this, so that we can get it posted on the website quickly, so that we don't have to run through a lot of revisions. Even if you decide to make some changes to it, and show those changes at our next meeting, and we can keep updating as we go through the process. It takes probably 3 or 4 hours to go through and make sure that the write-up matches the fund summaries and so on and so forth as we go through it. So that would just be a recommendation of mine, but I'll follow your lead of what you'd like to do, because this is just the tentative budget. It's not like we're adopting it for the final.
We make changes, I think we'll need to state in the motion, right, that we're adopting the, like, or if you
You
want
don't
to not.
necessarily have to
Okay.
at that point in time, because you're not adopting a final budget. And we will make additional changes to it. For instance, we don't know the final debt service on the new bonds that we'll have. We don't know, the corresponding tax that will go with the GO bonds. And we don't know our final tax rate and revenue with our base property taxes. So there are several changes that will be made through the process that we know about, in addition to any other elective type changes that we might make as we go through the process.
Great.
So. Pardon me. And I've got a little bit of a cold, so.
This budget is making you emotional.
It is, yeah, very choked up. So, so this is the write-up for the tentative budget. It used the proposed budget that we went over a couple of meetings back to kind of provide the framework for this, with a couple of things that we added back into it. So in the second paragraph, it kind of outlines some of the changes that we made. Excuse me. Well, let's actually start in the first one. So this tentative budget includes the effect of issuing about $20 million of general obligation bonds that we're anticipated to do in the next several weeks here. We're authorized to do up to $30 million. And part of that is paying back in the current fiscal year, $1,516,000 to our general fund for the debt service that has been funded from the general fund and paid from the CDRA fund as we've gone through that. And then also paying off the remaining portion of the current bond that we have outstanding, which is just under $13 million on the Hillside Plaza. And that is accomplished through a transfer from our capital projects fund, which is where we have the revenues coming in from that bond, into the CDRA fund so that they can take care of that, as well as a little bit for some of the interest that we'll need to be making on that. And then additional items that we found out as we were going through this is changes from the April 15th city council meeting. We had looked at some stuff related to the annexation costs and realized that we've expended all of our 10,000 that we had in the current year budget. We anticipate possibly doing an additional annexation next year. Figured retaining 10,000 for that would probably be the best mode of action, course of action on that. so that we have the money to be able to cover any costs associated with that. Most of our costs go to those surveys of the land. They're expensive to get them taken care of. Might be a handful of other costs, but they're not, those other costs usually aren't too bad. As we go through that. And then the other, yes,
Okay, so the noticing costs are hundreds of dollars, the survey is thousands of dollars.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. The Unified Fire Authority, we had 270,000 in, and we had verbally talked that this was reducing down to 139,898. So we did reduce that in this as well. And then the amounts for the GO bond that were outlined just up above here, that we added those in so that they were officially in there rather than just in the last time we just said that we needed to add those.
So I'm gonna add real quick, Scott, that I'm really happy with the decrease from Unified Fire Authority. So, you know, there were a bunch of us that got together and really, you know, looked at things closer and, you know, anyway, the changes to go from, is the lowest percentage increase that we will have had with UFA for a long time. So there was deliberate effort to decrease that, and I think we'll all be happy, we're all happy to see that. Almost go down over $130,000, over $130,000, so.
Yeah, that was a very nice, you know, thing to be able to experience rather than having it go up. So, and then, so up here, it kind of describes the effects of the GO bond on the current year budget. But moving forward, we'll add in 1,325,000 or so. This is a placeholder of general obligation property tax that will come into the general fund. And then there will be a transfer from the general fund to the debt service fund of 1,325,000. So that's a zero net effect on the general fund because money comes in, money goes right back out. And then in the debt service fund, that transfer in will be offset by an expense of about 1,325,000 to pay the debt service on that bond. That will get trued up as we get the final pricing on the bond that we expect in a couple of weeks. And so we'll adjust this accordingly as we move forward on that. Excuse me, and incorporate that into the budget as well. But there's no ongoing effect in terms of plus or minus in terms of general fund balance, because this is just pass-through money that goes in to pay that debt service on the general obligation bond.
If you know anybody at the Fed, call them and tell them to vote to lower rates.
All in favor? Hello? Yeah, we definitely want lower rates if at all possible on this, so hopefully we see some things moving in the right.
Tomorrow's the last chance, so hopefully they do it.
Any questions on that kind of introduction summary there? Okay. So in the general fund, we expect to have a beginning fund balance of 6,500,000, almost even. Excuse me, it's a decrease of 1,108,000 over the current beginning fund balance, and that's about 337,000 better than our current year adopted budget. So that's a good thing. Usually we're a little better than 337,000, and the reason why we're not quite that much better is our sales tax revenues just aren't as much as we would like them to be. They're still positive.
Find anything about that.
Couldn't find anything about it.
It's your voice.
Creepy. Obviously talking too loud. But we're required to hold 5% according to state statute, and then an additional 1% from city ordinance. So we're about 1.5 million on that.
We still have 4 months left to collect for this fiscal year,
We do.
so yeah, we'll see how that.
By more.
And I kind of hope, expect that we'll probably see for the month of March and April, increases in sales as people both stock up on different things in anticipation of not knowing what's coming out in the future and in some of the higher dollar purchases such as vehicles. So I kind of anticipate possibly a little rise in some of those months. And we'll see in the next couple, weeks if that really holds true, but we'll see on that.
You know, along those lines, you know, looking at the year that we're, you know, our new next fiscal year and the relative unreliability of the levels of sales tax that we've enjoyed in past years, if depending on what happens in the national and international scene, you know, I'm growing day by day, having grave concerns about what these tariff, whatever you want to call them, the tariff fluctuations and changes that are happening within the global economy based on the leadership in the United States. And I wonder how that, I mean, is that worthy of a council discussion of if we need to hunker down, so to speak, and not necessarily anticipate the levels of at least sales tax revenue that we've enjoyed in past years, if we do go into a deeply recessionary time. Is that something that you?
I don't know what we would discuss. I mean, yeah, we have to have some evidence first. I know the, you know, the GDP for the first quarter, showed a decrease, but the reasons for that, and that are mostly trade balance, deficits. And so the slowing of the economy, I think it could be a valid discussion. I don't know what we would do right now. I think we would need actual real evidence. And it seems sales tax receipts down, which is our biggest vulnerability before we, but I think, you know, I think that, I'm not saying that I don't think it's a worthy discussion eventually, but I don't think we have enough evidence to even look at anything currently. That's my opinion.
The uncertainty is the certainty right now.
Well, I mean, we just had our financial advisor here, you know, talk about how sales spending is up right now as people anticipate that there's going to be some severe cost increases in the, you know, regular goods, building costs, you know, automobiles, etc. So if there's a bump up now, I think there is some mounting evidence that is, again, bringing me real concern, not only about this budget, but, you know, also as we consider entering into these partnerships based on the new town center. It seems like we're in a kind of a volatile period.
So inflation numbers come out every month. The last inflation numbers that came out were the lowest since 2021. So it's the first time they've actually been on the Fed's target of what they want. So that could obviously change, and a lot of experts think that it could change with the next set of numbers. But what I'm saying is we need to see some of this data before we jump to conclusions. So I think if we saw a big jump in the inflationary numbers that will come out towards, you know, within probably days, that, you know, and then maybe in 1 more month, and I think maybe, hey, maybe we have that discussion, but there's no evidence that there's, you know, other than, you know, the possibility that tariffs are gonna create inflation. I mean, we need to wait, in my opinion. So.
Well, one other thing kind of related to that is I have reduced the projection for sales taxes from what it has been in the past. Like for next year, we're at 9.5 million rather than 10.1 million. So there's significant reductions in terms of our overall projection in sales tax compared to what it was, say, a year ago. And so we're not, you know, we're not aiming super too high. We could even possibly be aiming low because there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting that I have definitive, I just think it's worthy of,
I
you
think
know,
it's good to be
putting it
on
on
our
the
radar.
table, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to be on our radar for sure. So for a potential discussion, I don't.
Thank you.
So the next screen is just a screenshot of last year's property tax details. And it's a confusing screen. Yes, you're in it a lot. It's hard for, I understand most of it, but literally not all of it, and I can get through and muck through, but once we get our new final rates, then we'll have that, you know, for the next, well, not the next time we meet, but second meeting in June, we'll have it
Remind me the lag time, is it 2 months lagged?
for sales tax.
Yes.
Yeah, so when we get the sales taxes that are coming up at the end of the month here, where they'll be for March.
Have we made any projections, Matt, as far as reimbursements to our CRA funds for road work in our two areas that we currently have?
I still have that on my list to do. I don't foresee that being a large number, but it's mostly been maintenance on those, like a slurry seal and that, and those couple of them.
So, yeah, let's make that a little bit of a higher priority. I kind of wanted to
Okay.
do that
I'll
done
get that
before
done.
as it starts.
Note on that. So looking through, we've got our property taxes budgeted at $8,379,000. And that includes $100,000 of new growth estimate. As you know, we got several new annexations coming in mid-year, as well as a reasonable year in terms of finished new construction items. And so we anticipate that being around $100,000. The current tax rate is 0.001357. We anticipate that to go down. It typically goes down as values go up. And we'll get our final number around the 10th of June when that typically comes in.
Remind me, is Tavachi gonna be done July 1?
Yes,
Yeah, July 1.
Okay, so it's Creek Road West that will be
Right.
January.
Right.
Up here, okay.
So we'll get Water Vista Way.
We'll get Water Vista as soon as,
Tavachi.
as soon as that's signed, it comes on.
great neighborhoods to bring into the city.
So like I said, we've added $1,325,000 as a placeholder for property tax associated with the general obligation bond, and we'll chew that up. It'll be right around there, though. Once we get the pricing, we'll know that. That'll be around the first part of June as well, when we'll finally have that. Excuse me. So in 23-24, we received just about 9.1 million in sales tax revenue. We're anticipating 9,250 area in terms of sales tax for the current year. And then, like I said, 9.5 million for next year. And that's, that's about, if you look at that 9.5 to 9,250, that's 250,000 increase. But overall, that's a maybe 2.7% net increase year over year. That's actually quite low. We've been traditionally 4 to 8% has been, I'll call that a normal kind of a growth rate in the last, say, 10 years or so. And we've had some years as high as the mid-teens in terms of growth. Those were kind of abnormal and are not, anticipated. But I think that, being in the mid to upper 2% range is conservative and not anticipating too much, but just some growth as we go through there. And remember, even if we have some reductions in numbers of things that people buy, if the price on those things is up a little bit because it's a percentage driven tax, you'll still receive, about the same. So there's a price component as well as there's the quantity factor.
They buy less at higher prices. You're
Yes.
still getting your-
Yes. And so depending on it, there's a lot of fluctuation and it's hard to anticipate because all those things are factors in what you're looking at. So,
Because half of our revenue from sales tax comes from the state portion. As the state continues to grow and population and retail will, that number will increase, even though we're more landlocked and we'll have a lot of growth as of today.
yeah. I want to maybe skip down through. So telecom tax is not considered in this. I don't want to go through everything, but if there's something that you want me to talk about, go ahead and pause me. So the telecom franchise tax is not included, but would probably generate somewhere between 300 and 400,000 annually. And there's about a 3 to 6 month window before you can implement it, because you have to implement it on it before a quarter starts. And then at the end of that quarter is when you can start actually implement it because of noticing requirements with the state tax commission and things. So just keep that in mind as you move forward. If that's something that you consider to go on, it won't be instant in terms of the turnaround time.
Well, you won't get that amount this next year.
Yeah, and that's an annual amount. And so quarterly, you're gonna be somewhere between 75,000 and 100,000. So depending on when you can get it done, we can't get it done at this point in time for July 1, even if you wanted to. The earliest we could do it would be October 1. And then if you go past July 1, the earliest you can get it is January 1, et cetera, because of noticing requirements that you have with the state tax commission.
So Matt, I'm sorry, Scott, I'm not.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Not seeing the fifth of the fifth in here for expected revenue.
Yeah, we did not, and sorry, I don't think I actually made a note on that one. But well, maybe I did. No, that's not a tax type, so it was down in, I thought I mentioned that.
That's a bunch of money.
What?
That's a good chunk of money.
It'll be, yeah, no less than 500, between 400 and 500,000.
Yeah, and we're unsure of the timing of when that comes in and so on and so forth, so we're gonna handle that as an adjustment. That would have to be transferred into or be a revenue directly into our capital projects fund, and I actually think it's probably mentioned in our capital projects revenue, because we would probably just have it go straight into there. And so that would be what we would anticipate, because it has to go to those transportation type construction projects. And so we would just anticipate that that would go straight through. So even if it came into the general fund, it would just be a revenue in and a transfer right back out.
So that totally makes sense. I'd rather see it in the revenue, I mean, in the budget come in, shown in the just regular revenues,
Okay,
if that's okay.
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
fine.
so if we go to adopt the final, and that, it's not even that big of a deal, but.
Yeah. and
Even if it's a direct transfer, which I still wanna know that it's coming in.
yeah.
Yep.
And we are keeping an eye on that because the county's on a different fiscal year than us. Sometimes if it's late in the year, i.e. from July through December, it might hit our next fiscal year.
Well, I'm hearing that it starts July 1 and they're talking quarter, so I don't, it's not in stone, but. So we could see 4 installments there in our next budget
Yeah,
year.
entirely possible, yeah. Um. So our tax type sales tax, or tax type revenues show an increase of 1,155,000, with that 1,325,000 being associated with the general obligation property tax, and then 170,000 decrease year over year in all other tax lines, and so on and so forth. And then below, there's some other changes as we look through, excuse me, some of the things. For instance, our Class C roads, we're budgeting at 1,600,000, which is a $120,000 increase over what's in the current year budget. So that matches a little closer to the money that we're receiving currently. Excuse me. Then a decrease in our interest rates, both as our fund balances decline a little bit, and then as we anticipate reductions in the actual interest rates, we're anticipating that will decrease a little bit. It's not going to be huge, but a little bit of a decrease in terms of that. And then so this we already recognized as a mid-year adjustment on us, but because we're comparing back to what we adopted originally last year, $180,000 net increase in revenue, and this is the revenue from the Department of Transportation for the 3 new police officers that we have doing a lot of the traffic work up in the canyon areas, especially during the storms. And then the 22,000 in new grant from the county health department, and that's offset with some expenditures increases down below. So overall, we've got revenues increasing by 1,347,000, and that's predominantly, if you want to just narrow it down to 2 things, the general obligation bond increase, and then the 22,000 that we have up above here. There are ups and downs in other revenues, but just to boil it down to 2 quick things, and then or a 3.5% overall increase year over year on that. In our expenditures, we haven't changed anything in the employee costs. The employee costs still include no market, a 2% COLA, a merit that would be 3% for civilians that are not current at the top of the range. And then a one step in the salary structure for sworn employees that would average somewhere around 3.6%. Excuse me, and then there's a 0.5% amount that is allocable to employees on a one-time adjustment per the approval of the city manager. That would not go into their base salary, but would be more like a one-time bonus kind of a thing that would go to employees at the discretion of the city manager. So when all employees are considered, the average of all this is 2.27% amongst all employees. About $241,000 net on that particular one, 229,000 on the COLA. The longevity that's included, longevity is a 1% one-time bonus type thing for those who are at the top of the range that are not eligible for merit, but are eligible for COLA. And then health increase, that changed 6.4%. That's a $71,000 increase. And then a $47,000 decrease related to other changes that we have affected in there. So the net of that ends up being $24,495. There's a slight reduction in non-sworn, so non-police employee URS rates. That equals $40,962. And so, and then year over year annualization of employees, as we take a snapshot of what we adopted in the budget last year to what we had. I think this was early in March, can't remember the date, March 7th or something like that. It shows a $28,000 net savings from that turnover of different employees who, you know, were budgeted a year ago versus are now. So all in all, that ends up being a $426,000 change, excuse me, from the current budget.
So Scott, let's stop there.
Yeah.
So we've individually as a council, we've discussed what we want to do for COLA and merit. But we wanted to do it as a public item before making any changes to the budget. So and you all help me if I'm wrong. I think we have a pretty clear consensus. And we've talked about either doing a 2% COLA with a 1% merit or 1% COLA with a 2% merit. And we could have that discussion now if you know, one of the things I've thought about is meeting in the middle, 1.5, 1.5, but let's talk about some of your thoughts about what we decided we want to do.
3% was the total, and
Yeah.
how it was divvied was,
That's right.
to me, was determined by what impact it would have on the employees and their eventual salaries. It's interesting to me that we're talking about a one-time bonus this year that was lasted last year is not possible.
We were
So
shamed.
we were,
last time.
yeah, I was trying to figure out the word, we were thinking that, I mean, I do like that we are able to recognize employees who are going above and beyond. I like a bonus opportunity. But I think what we have said repeatedly is that at least in our current situation, we cannot sustain the rate of growth in our compensation, and so that's why we wanted to look at a 3% total.
Oh, I see. Are you making the point that does that bonus fit within that 3%? Is that what you're thinking, Susan?
That too, but also kind of calling out the elephant in the room, like last year we were shamed for even talking about it, and this year it's like, oh, sure, let's do this, so. It's a good idea. I was really trying to wrap my head around how the implications of that, I couldn't include it. So 3% total is what we've discussed.
And I think some of the thinking that goes into this, you know, we did a comparison and Jared got some numbers for us, which is good. At the comparison group, we were the very highest last year. If we did previous years, we would have been right at the highest as well from our comparison group. So, you know, we're trying to look at things reasonable, like Councilmember Highland said, in slowing the rate of growth a little bit. And we feel like this is a year that we need to to say, hey, we need to do, I think the average was about 3 to 4. And so if we go to on the lower end of the average from what these other cities are doing, we do know that we're probably gonna need to do a market increase next year or a market study to see where we are based to other jurisdictions. But as for this year, I'm in favor of like Councilmember Hunter said, of 3% total. I just don't know if we want to go 1-2 or 2-1 or 1.5, 1.5.
To your point, Mayor, like, Sandy, for instance, you know, we would be pretty darn close to where they are this year, but we absolutely were much, much higher than last year, and they're playing a little catch up. So, you know, I still think that from my understanding, and anyone here can share any other insights, but I still think we're being pretty competitive as far as looking at what others are doing. Yeah, I don't feel strongly exactly how that breakdown. Maybe it is smart to just 1.5 each of them, and they're each getting the equal amount of love, but
Are you talking a 3% total
yeah.
increase over the compensation amount, or are you just,
1.5 COLA, 1.5.
because that plays with your numbers differently then?
Correct,
what I wanted
that's
to
right,
know.
that's correct.
Is how that
Yeah.
affects the numbers, how that affects salaries over time.
And how will that merit
Because you,
affect some employees more or less than others?
I mean, COLA rises all, everybody's.
because while we've eliminated the step program for
Right.
civilian, you still have the step program for PD right now. Well, it affects everybody, merit impacts civilian.
Okay.
So, and sorry, so we're trying, I'm missing the point.
I'm just trying to figure out if you're looking for a dollar amount or. Or if you're just, I'm just saying, if you affect
Yeah,
COLA, you affect all 97 employees. If you affect merit, you're affecting about half.
Yeah, and when I say, you know, 1.5 on each, I think it, you know, I don't know what those numbers mean. It sounds fair because it's equal to one another, but in practice, it may not be. So,
So
I mean, we can easily do the math.
we ran the numbers, the percentage of COLA is about 120,000, a percentage of merit's about 37,000.
So 140, we've got projected in our budget 2%.
Scott? 118. for-
Yeah, 119 on COLA for 1%. And merit is about, just about 37,000. It depends because they compound on each other, so it's a slightly
So
different.
if we went from COLA from 2 to 1.5, we'd be saving 60,000 from 229. to 170. 170 for COLA and then merit. What did you say that was, man?
37.
So you'd save 18,500 if it was 0.5% on that.
But
Or-
we're sitting at 3.5 or 3.
We're sitting at 3, and so if you went down to 1.5, then you'd be, another.
Greater increase
55-ish.
in COLA.
What's that?
You have a greater increase per percentage change in COLA than you do with merit.
So we also did a pretty quick study with a lot of the comparison cities through the data we have, and as far as where we're at, and this is where the market study is going to come in next year, but we still sit on average right below middle with all the other cities in the valley that we compare to. Salary ranges right now. I wouldn't be surprised if the market study comes back next year. I don't know too, but
and is it Holiday that only have COLA?
Yes. They only have one metric that they use.
It's COLA, which is kind of hard to compare the two.
and everybody calls it a little something different, so you have to really dig into what they're all doing.
What trend did you notice when you dug in?
It's about a 4% on average around the valley is what everybody's proposing right now. Some lower, some higher, obviously.
But to Councilmember Holton's point and mayor's, the past few years we've been much higher than.
We would be highest of the
Really?
comparison this last year. Probably be similar, if not the previous.
So.
Are we
to
looking for
answer
a
your
decision
question,
right
I'm
now?
not looking for a dollar amount. I'm still thinking in percentages,
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you're thinking about it.
because we know,
Right.
you know, the impact of civilian versus sworn employees, merit side. We also know that COLA affects us. I mean, our salaries change too.
COLA also moves the ranges, or merit moves you within the range.
Say that again.
COLA moves the ranges to keep us competitive in the market.
Whole range of like an A4 moves up with COLA, with the merit, they just.
It moves you within that range.
So when you talk about how we're kind of middle of the pack, I think you were saying, Jared, on salaries. So would a COLA would impact that problem the most?
Right, so for everybody that's a COLA, all their ranges move up, so we stay where we're.
So our goal was to stay somewhere in the middle of the pack. We don't want to be the highest, we don't want to be the
Right.
lowest. And so fairness, if that's one of the things we're looking for, would be to do COLA at 2% and merit. Then we'd be getting closer to the middle. Am I right about
Yeah,
that?
well, and that's what I'm hearing. There's a couple.
You'd be moving that range, which is what we compare when we look at other cities, so.
Which it sounds like there's a couple things in there, which is one, I think you're hearing, they're wanting to get that range higher to be more competitive. But then you're also hearing that the merit impacts the civilian side more than the sworn side. So there's kind of two different
So
things at play.
UFA did something really interesting a year ago, and Riley would know this. So they actually did when they went to market to see where everybody was, they before were doing it before COLA was implemented. So if you know, we decided to go to market next year, but we also were looking at a 3% COLA, we would put that COLA into where we stood against the market. And it's
Yeah,
The
it
whole-
used to be the market first and the COLA.
and COLA second.
kind of on top.
The whole purpose is to almost stop chasing your tail. Everybody's chasing each
So
other.
we flipped it and do the COLA, then the market,
Yeah.
they accept the difference.
Yep. Yeah, and it made a difference. That's actually part of why our increase stopped.
And help me understand this. If you have a higher COLA, it helps those that have been here the longest that are tapped out on the merit side. Is that
Yes.
correct?
It raises the range so they get the COLA. Yeah, if you're topped out. And there's no COLA, all you do is you get the longevity. bonus
Yeah.
Instead of the increased salary every year.
So really, depending on the form, it's kind of a person by person scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're affecting, I just wanna make sure you're considering that. I don't know what the right answer is, but whatever you do, you're affecting different people differently.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in hearing from Chief
Yeah.
Russo. How do you see it, since obviously your officers, as I understand it, are affected by COLA, but not by merit? Do you have any enlightenment you want to share with us, you know, related as we think about merit versus COLA?
Well, obviously, we'd like the COLA more, and we have to be competitive. I recognize it's expensive, but it's not as expensive as trying to recruit officers. For instance, we have some open allocations now, and we put out, you know, a hiring. And through that hiring, we have two candidates, and there were two that Barbara and I recruited. That's it. Cause they
Out of how
watched-
many spots?
But we have two.
Two spots you're looking
Yeah,
for.
but
Okay.
normally we get,
You have 2 spots and 2 candidates.
and we had to find them. Other than that, there's none that applied. We're,
You had a challenge replacing Samantha,
we,
We had more applicants, but
not qualified.
super qualified.
Yeah.
so we try to stay in the top three,
Yeah.
you know, in the top three. And it's hard to explain to the guys because this city is different, because in other cities, they have their own fire department and so forth. So if the police and fire follows the police. So we are middle of the pack. The UFA is number one, right?
No, we're
One or
top
two.
third.
Yeah, the top third.
Yeah, we're not even in the top three, top third-ish.
So that's just hard to explain to me.
Is 1.5 and 1.5 a bad idea?
I'm more comfortable with the two.
The 2 and 1.
Goodness. what just went through my mind is that, especially because we're gonna do a market study next year and then we'll really know where we are. And let's be honest, we're gonna have to do a lot of chewing up of our budget next year. We're really gonna have to look at this more critically. We're gonna catch up. We have not inflation proofed our budget. I will just say that, and we have not inflation proofed our budget.
Um,
And that's
do you
not the employee's fault.
Well, it's a tricky situation. You know, always on my mind is what's sustainable into perpetuity? And what are the uncertain times ahead? And, you know, and human resources are, you know, in my view, the most important resource we have. So it's a dilemma on all counts. Maybe leaning into the 2% for COLA and 1% for merit. What seems best to me.
what do you
I think
think?
I'm great with that. Good, that,
Yeah,
okay, let's do that. Okay, Scott, you got that?
Yeah, I'll look at that and bring that back. At the next meeting, so that you can have the. Net effect of all that, but it'll probably be around 37,000 coupons. I'm already not just renting. So no doubt, but it's 74, 75,000.
they still put the
And
one.
would you please reiterate for me what the total employee cost change was for last year versus what we will be projecting?
426.
Yeah,
It was 426,000 for last year's budget.
Oh, for last year's budget?
What was the total employee cost
Like 5 something.
increase in last year's budget versus what we're going to project into?
Yes, if I were giving 1%.
And the biggest thing that changes year over year is the effect of the COLA.
1%.
So if you have a high CPI year, you know, COLA is gonna be high. If you have a low CPI year, COLA is generally gonna be low. They don't always follow each other, but they somewhat mimic each other. And so like in the years when we had like, 7% CPIU, those are more costly years in terms of, the overall cost. This year, it's much lower at 2.9% CPIU, recommending a 2% COLA more closely mimics that. And stuff, so.
I understand that. I would be
Yeah.
attentive to that. It would just still be nice to have that translated into an
Yeah.
actual number.
Yeah, and that last year was 497 and we did a 3% COLA last year. So.
Scott, can I ask a question? Some clarification. So the longevity. If you're giving the formula of a COLA and merit, do a decision on either impact the longevity 1%? Is there kind of a domino effect, or that's just its own thing?
That's kind of separate, because if you're not already at the top end of the range, you wouldn't be eligible for it. So changing merit doesn't have an effect on longevity, because you would already be at the top end and then therefore be ineligible for a merit. So if you get the COLA, everybody gets the COLA in essence, unless you're out of the range totally. But on the merit versus the longevity, you either get one or the other, but not both.
Yeah, so in essence, if we were to do the 1% merit, basically everyone citywide, or everyone would be getting a 1%, the longevity folks, or the police are different, yeah.
But yeah, the civilians would get 1%, and then police and or civilians who are at the top of the range would get 1%.
Okay.
We good with that? Okay, yeah.
So I'll bring that back next time, the net on that, have it included in the packet and everything as we move forward. So elections, of course, we have 86,862 in there. We anticipate that to be lower than that, but still working with the county on trying to get all that kind of figured out. I don't know exactly what all we want to go through here, just maybe the total 7,500 for city attorney. 60,000 for, well, actually it's net zero in the recreation area, because we pulled 60,000 out and put 60,000 in. Mayor and council is currently sitting at 39,000.
May I just ask a quick question here? My understanding is that the travel and training budget had been 32,000. And so I'm a little unclear if it goes from 32,000 to 50,000. In my way of math, that's $18,000. So I'm a
So
little unclear why it says addition of 34,000.
currently sits at 16,000, and the prior year it was at 31,000.
We had a dip.
It was cut last year.
Oh, it was only 16,000 this year. Okay. All right, thank you.
So we had a brief discussion in the April 15th meeting about what that travel training budget would be. Is that if it's $50,000, does that mean each council member, mayor would be included, is allocated $10,000?
If you want to do it that way, you have to change your policy, I think.
Yeah.
What is the policy?
Policy just says that the council basically
That's
agrees
that.
that it's necessary for training and travel.
And
So how do we approve, or how do we work together as a council to approve? Does that way?
Yeah, and one of the things that I brought up,
Laid out.
one of the things that I,
Be specified in the policy, the type. And you wouldn't put an amount, because the amount could change every year, but you would just say an amount would be allocated to each council member for priorities for travel.
Yeah, my question is, how do you priorities? If you just have a $50,000 budget and there's no policy that really says.
yeah, and so one of,
I would imagine you carry a heavier burden than us. So
Yeah.
explain to me how the prioritization.
I think right now, I can't, they should probably speak to that. I think right now it's kind of a, maybe I want to call it a first come, first served basis. It's discretionary. One of the things that I advocate for, I think I mentioned to you all, was to give the council member some leeway, which is why kind of that breakdown per member, so that if there are certain priorities that, I think we all have different priorities, that there are some resources to be able to help advance some of those priorities that are outside of travel, that it's, if there's a community event that you're really wanting to focus on and there's an issue, if it's short-term rentals or active transportation or something where you can try to engage a little more and you have some resources to do that. I think it's your prerogative as an elected official to be able to do some of those things and work on some of these things that are platforms that you ran on. But that would be, I think to Jared's point, we'd have to tweak that a little bit. But right now, I think it is kind of once it's gone, it's gone. And
So, go ahead.
well, quickly, one of the reasons that I support changing this policy is that unlike many other cities, the legislators in Cottonwood Heights do not have any administrative support. Now, I can go to the executive of the city and ask if he will allow me to work with one of his staff and at his discretion. But in the other cities, as I can understand, no matter what the form of government, the legislators have within a budget some amount of like if I want to send out formal letters following up on something, I'm doing all that myself. I don't have any administrative support to do that. And as wonderful as Tiffany is to help me with things from printing a few things, so I see this as a step intermediary, I guess you could say, that if I knew I had some little pot of money, $6,000, $10,000 and I had to choose, okay, there's 2 ULCT meetings, I traveled to Washington, DC, but I have to stay within a budget. And as Councilman Holton just said, it helps me to attain some of the goals, that I'm trying to achieve. And I know how much, whereas in past years, there's been no clear guidance on that. And I think it would bring transparency and accountability. I think it would have a lot of positives to do something that's in writing, and however that amount of money is allocated, how the percentages go. But I do think it would be helpful for the legislators.
I agree with that, actually, and I don't think I would put a whole lot of limits on. I think we're all accountable to our residents, the taxpayers, and so if if we do something that's a little questionable and go to something, I think that that's our job to, you know, we're accountable to them. And if they find something that you travel to that's not really gonna help you in your job, you're gonna be accountable to what they say. So I think, but I do think we should have the discretion to say, this is a priority and I really wanna do this and not be questioned, I think.
I think there's some opportunities there too with local engagement. Where there's.
That's
there's
exactly
things
right.
that, you know, we wanna. We included in that budget that will allow us to participate with some of the things going on locally.
That's why I think it needs to be broadened between just more than just travel.
Mm-hmm.
That, and I would look to those in the city that, to give guidance, but if you wanted to put a little social together at Anzac Park to talk about an issue and you were buying some cookies for people and some bottles of water, you could have some resources to do some public engagement like that, which I think is only a positive.
Yeah.
I want some guardrails around that, just because of what happened to some county.
I agree, and I think when we were talking with Jared about it, I think we'd also look to Jared and some of these folks to say, hey, that's an appropriate use or not, and we should, as the legislators, put some guardrails around that for sure. I agree 100%. There should be some
I
guardrails.
think we would rely on the city manager and finance director and our
I get where I'm
attorney.
going, like, I don't
Yeah.
want one person spending
100%.
40,000 of the 50,000, all of a sudden.
That's right.
10 left, and I don't, and
That's
I
right.
didn't get anything
Yeah.
for
I
any
agree,
of my priorities.
I agree.
So I think specificity is probably better than vaguery.
So it sounds like completely outside this budget process, we'll approach the policy and
Policy.
come up with a suggested
I
change.
could support the budget amount if we do that.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
Well, and thank you. That's where I'm coming from too, because we do need to scrutinize these, yeah.
Go, Scott.
So the city manager, there's an 85,000 net overall increase in that. Excuse me. Finance and $149,000 net overall increase. Records, culture and human resources, a $4,600 net overall increase. City hall maintenance, a net increase of 12,000. CED, we didn't actually have any recommended changes there.
Good job, Mike.
Finance and IT though, one of the things we talked about the retreat is actually having at least some additional dollars we allocated because of the anticipated changes that are coming with AI and tools that will actually make all of your jobs easier. Is any of that included, or you're just talking about your increase is just status quo,
This is just status.
So can I throw one thing out there?
please?
Matt, when do our contracts end?
They're all different.
So for instance, the state of Utah, it has a contract. They're a Google state, okay? And I know we have Microsoft and they just went out to bid currently, and Microsoft and Google went after each other in this bid. And the one thing, I'm only bringing this up because there are now solutions out there, and the reason why I think Google won that state bid is because AI, Notebook, all their AI tools were already included in its standard package now. That's become a standard offering, just like Google Drive and these other things that were there, that we may want whenever the contracts are, and maybe Microsoft does that by the time our contracts are up. But I think there are now offerings out there that we should look at that are standard offerings without having to go out and buy them individually, if that makes sense.
It does. Some of the AI is just being thrown in.
Yeah.
The existing contracts, but I could only rely on my own experience, and my husband just did training for his entire company, has 112 employees. You said 97 here, 112 employees. And he was tasked with saving 8 hours per week, just on administrative tasks. They did it. It was a $10,000 training, AI, 8 hours less for every employee having to just do administrative. So I would like to go to bat and say,
Agreed.
if some of these things are available, Maybe we just have to do a budget amendment, but I would really like to lighten the load on our staff. and-
Sounds like we might be a little limited due to contracts, but maybe Matt, an update on
Just,
contracts.
just so you're aware, we are running some tests and trials. We have a co-pilot, we have ChatGPT. We've been meeting with other, and we're just doing this within our existing means as much as we can. So I mean, we're making it stretch and trying to do these things as well.
The other thing to mention when they
There are
went,
savings.
when they went to bid with the state, their offering that included it was cheaper than the standard Microsoft package. And obviously I can trust Matt 100% on whatever tools he thinks are best. But I do think that I guess I would just suggest to shop out because things are innovating so quickly
Yes.
that we may be able to save money and get these tools at the same time.
But
I don't know the
thank you
timing
for
on that.
articulating.
I don't know the timing though,
Yeah,
so
Yep.
And carry on.
good luck.
I think we're.
Would like to make a request for another IT person now.
I think we've already talked about the 12,000 increase in city hall maintenance. Community and economic development, that's right, nothing.
Now, Scott, we're going a little slow.
Yeah.
Let's look at anything that we've been through this, I think, one time, but anyway,
Yeah.
you see changes from.
Well, I do have one question within this subject matter. So we're saying that we have a revenue source of 180,000 coming in essence from UDOT annually. I beg your pardon, yeah, it's 180. For Canyon maintenance, that is the traction control program that goes on snow mornings. So if we show that as an increase in revenue, shouldn't that be reflected in an additional cost that CHPD has to maintain these 3 additional officers? Because it's not really
Because we-
$180,000 in
we added
revenue we
those
can spend.
officers last year. Those were added prior to the 180,000 coming in, so this is the 180,000
But-
itself.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that his officers are, well,
Well, it was
The
already,
expense side had been added in October of 2021, and then when we adopted the budget for July of 2023, that, you know, goes through the prior year and then the current year, those costs were all included for all those things. The revenue became apparent to us in about, I don't know, August or so of last year. And so we added the 180,000 of revenue in for the current budget that we're sitting in right now. And because it wasn't in at the beginning of that year when we pulled everything, we have to add that in for the budget that we're going to, because we pulled what was in the original adopted budget as our base.
We're actually gonna see an increase in revenue as well. For one reason, that number is tied to a percentage that goes up. Plus, we're gonna, after a review of what happened, one entity is gonna go away and we will collect more revenue, so.
well. Okay, and I know we're running short on time, but I think many of the council members are aware that with the traction control commitment, all of our traffic officers, other than the ones in the core of the city, are dedicated to only the traction area and mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon. And we no longer have a roving officer on those snow mornings. And it has put a real burden on the residents along SR 210, not having a roving officer to help them get in and out of the 3 main collector streets within SR
Two
210.
traffic officers.
And that'll change for next year. Go ahead, Chief, sorry.
Oh, is there something I don't know about?
Well, if we don't have answers yet, but we will. Go ahead, what were you gonna say?
We,
Did what we discussed.
right, we had this discussion, so we think we have a remedy. That was what the mayor.
So there may be increased revenues. Would we be hiring or would we be?
No, just, I can staff it in overtime to resolve that issue.
Oh,
We agree it's an issue.
oh, super. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good update.
There's just no.
Okay.
in front of it.
Okay.
So moving down, go into the overall impact on the general fund. At the end of page 5, it shows us that we would have a use of fund balance of just over 2.7 million. And then our ending fund balance at the end of that fiscal year next year would be 3.8 million, just about. And that would be 13.7 or so% of our revenues and then it shows are required to have. Now, a note is our budgeted ending fund balance will always be less than what our actual is because we always recognize a little bit more revenue. We always have some under expend in terms of our expenses. So it's usually somewhere between, say 750,000, give or take a little bit there, that we end up being better. So instead of having 3.7 million, we'll probably be somewhere in the 4.5 to 5 million range in terms of net ending fund balance. But we can't budget for that. We have to budget the budgeted number, which is more draconian. Any questions on that fund? So here's where it talked about the quarter of the quarter and the fifth of the fifth. So we anticipate getting the fifth of the fifth, and we can run, and like the mayor said, we had that running through here, but we can just change it and have it be a transfer into the capital projects fund and do a revenue in the general fund. That would be fine to do it that way. And once we get that amount, then we'll plug that in there for whatever that amount is anticipated to be. And then we'll increase the associated expenditures that are with that. Overall, if you look at the capital project stuff, this is a number that will be interesting to watch as Matt does his presentation later. Outside of the programs that are specified, we'd have about 1.76 million to be able to utilize for those road projects, both current year road projects and any grant type road projects without adding any additional funds in, of which that fifth of the fifth might bring some additional funds in to help to go to some of that. Stormwater fund, going up to a billing rate of $8.44 a month, starting in July. And
Just sorry, real quick, Scott,
Yeah.
that 1.76 and well, the overall street funding at 1.96 is not including the fifth of the fifth.
not including, yeah. So anything that would be coming in the fifth of the fifth would add to that.
Okay.
Yep. Stormwater, $8.44 per ERU. So, budget that on through $200,000 of transfer, expenses of 1.8 million in there. Some of that is maintenance type and offsetting some personnel costs, and then others is for true capital costs in our stormwater areas. The CDRA fund, we don't anticipate a lot of net changes in there. We'll have about 1.9 million of fund balance there. Some of that is for both the older projects and some for the Canyon Center
Sorry,
project.
question, Matt,
Yeah.
the $500,000 to rebuild stormwater. I know we had a discussion earlier this year, just the state that it's in. Is that like 1/32 of what is needed? I know we had some discussion of trying to get a holistic
So
look at that.
we already approved a contract to get a camera
To figure
in
that
for
out.
the entire.
Yeah, we're working on, we're still working on doing the analysis on the actual physical conditions of the pipes. But yeah, 500 is not enough. I mean, we're spending quite a bit right now on just one small section of an emergency that we have. So, but we're making headway.
So depending on, the 750,000 in property taxes, this is related to the Canton Center project. And then that gets distributed out through a formula that distributes that. We actually received just under 500,000 this year. So this is a little bit of a high number, but we just distribute out what we receive based on that, and it's all in there. We have 550,000 that's operational revenue for the Hillside Plaza Shopping Center. So as we go into deconstructing that will affect that revenue, but it will also affect our expenditures that we have going out, because these are operational expenditures related to the plaza. And then it will transition to a capital project that will be in the capital projects fund at that point in time. So in the CDRA fund, we still anticipate to have about 1.9 million. You can see, Fort Union about 1.2 million, Cottonwood Corporate Center about 366, and we're up to about maybe 340 or so thousand for the Hillside Plaza area that we could utilize as well. excuse me. Debt service fund, this is where we would see the only change in here is adding in the general obligation bond here. And then we don't have to continue to pay on the 2023 bond, because that would be paid off by the end of the current year that we're in. And then the net transfer in to cover those amounts in there. So anyhow, so the items that aren't included, there's no property tax included. For each 1% property tax increase, you'd get a little better than $80,000 additional revenue. For the telecom franchise tax, you'd get somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000. No transportation fee is currently in here, and we don't have a current estimate on what that would be. That would need to be developed by a study. And then it goes into all the details down below. So if you have any questions, I can answer them.
Any questions? Great. Hey. Thank you, Scott. Yep, appreciate that. So I think I am going to rearrange our staff reports, because I think we might not get to everything today. So what I might do is move up item C to item B. So our public works grant funding discussion, we need to get to that for sure today. And then we'll see where we are as far as flat boat live work and city. So Matt, we're going to turn to you and get on public works grant funding discussion.
You aim all your arrows that way. We're bringing this back to you, council, to, I guess, get direction. We as a staff, we're in a stall mode, I guess you could say. We're not quite sure where you want us to head on some of these things. FYI, I don't believe it was in the staff report, but if you haven't heard yet, we did receive a federal aid for the intersection at Fort Union and Highland to redo that intersection. So we did receive federal aid fund for that. That won't come up for about 3 more years, but we received, I believe, about $2 million to redo that intersection, which is a great thing to happen. But on top of that, it also adds to the matches that we have to meet for all of these things of about 7%, 6.77%. We have the projects we've discussed at the retreat. We gave you a list of shortfalls as well as a list of matches that we have for all the federal aids that we have coming up. And these things are happening, and listen, well, I don't need to share with you, you all know that we have a finite amount of money. We have these projects that are out there. We did discuss briefly taking the federal aid projects that we have, pushing those off down the road, and basically drop back and punt.
And the federal aid projects are
Well, you have the Bengal Highland.
Highland.
We have the what do we call Highland 2 Trail, the west side here of from Belair down to Fort Union. We have the trail on Fort Union down by Wasatch down to 30th East. That one comes up next year as well. And then what other federal aid do we remember?
We have phase 3, which is moving.
Okay, we have phase 3, which is the west side of Highland, south of Fort Union as well. So those projects are on the books. They are coming up, and if we were to try to bite into them, we've given you the numbers before, about 1-some odd million short of the need. I've talked to Wasatch Front. They don't have an issue with us pushing off for another year these projects. It's not like it's going away. We can push those down the road a little bit and take the opportunity to give this a little bit more thought in how we're going to approach it, and then maybe prioritizing what you as a council would like to see. We've had a myriad of discussions about the intersection here of Highland and Bengal Boulevard, which is on the books as a federal aid. That is actually now, here and now. is tied in conjunction with a county project of $1 million over there. Once again, we have all of these matches that go along with it. We, as a staff, I guess I should say, are looking for direction on, do you want us to continue to push forward with these things, sign contracts and get these moving forward? Or do we want to, I'll approach Wasatch Front and say, we're going to, I can't think of the word, hold off until next year. And then we'll review and then come back and do that. You've already approved the sidewalk on Creek, the 2 sections of sidewalk on Creek, as well as, the Highland, the phase 3 project we talked about, which is the environmental and property, identification. So,
I think the biggest question for me is what pot of money do we have? And
So here's the thing to remember, so the line item that we just looked at for roads.
Yes.
That's where that money would come, it would decrease the amount of money that we're spending on roads. The one thing that we can think about is that we are gonna see an increase in the
Fifth.
budget from the 5th to the 5th.
yeah.
My only thought is, I think if we better understood how much we wanted to allocate or pull away from that existing budget as a council, I feel like we could then potentially prioritize some projects, and that might be 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. I think I've got my own opinions on what those should be, but I won't bore everyone with it.
If I may interject
Yeah.
here, as you're talking, I mean, this is great, as you're talking about it. We've already taken you've already done a decrease in this budget from last year's road money. And brought it down to about $2 million. Out of that 2 million, that's where that money would have to come from. The overages and or the matches would have to come from that. Right now, we are on year 2 of the list, project list. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, year 2. The neighborhood down the street here, help me out with the name. Stephenson area. We have that on the books right now for reconstruction. We're finalizing the design on that and finishing that. The estimates right now, obviously, we are gonna have to pare this back, are coming in at about $2.1 million to reconstruct that neighborhood and the condition it's in and bringing it up to standards and things of that nature. So the $2.2 million we have in the budget now won't cover that.
You're pushing back a year of the 5-year capital improvement plan.
So I'm just,
That answers
these
that
are the
question.
numbers.
And that's the one that's posted on the website as we are doing this.
We're moving, it's year 2 of the 5-year plan. Yes, correct.
Back to your point, like, let's
Yeah.
talk about basic infrastructure.
Yeah, no, that answers that. I mean, for me, there's some things that I'd like to prioritize, for instance, helping those kids that are going up to Brighton. I know we were gonna make that turn that as you come up Highland Drive, you're driving north, you kind of hit that bank up Bengal. Right, I know there was some plans of trying to make that a little safer for kids to go up to the school,
Hey, you missed
but
that.
those are future. Oh, yeah, no, I'm just saying, those are, yeah, we don't have the money for them. So I think you answered my question, Matt.
You do have to give something up. There's not a pot of money that's
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
there waiting. So we do have to, if we're gonna fund any, that's the answer we need tonight is, do we move forward with any of these grant projects, knowing that there's a cost to other projects or delay to other projects?
Well, and I feel like I need to know of the 3 federal projects that you mentioned, at what point do we lose monies or, do we have 2 years of wiggle room, 1 year? Like especially you mentioned Fort Union Boulevard from Wasatch Boulevard to 3000 East. There's residents that live in the Apple Valley neighborhood on the south side of Fort Union that see a lot of dangerous aspects about that stretch, the need for continuous sidewalk and
To
so,
answer your question, my understanding and my discussions with Wasatch, it's obviously not an indefinite, but there is a couple of years in there where we can move this down the road.
For all of these items equally, okay?
Yeah, we can, but remember, as we're pushing them down the road, we're also have the others that are sitting in the basket that we're pushing them into there, okay? So we're kind of like air traffic control right now. We've got them lined up. We're trying to land them. And that's what we're trying to figure out, how you want us to approach it. We will definitely approach Wasatch Front and again, and have that discussion. I mentioned this last time at my last technical advisory committee meeting. We actually approved one that was 10 years old to move forward, that they've been on the books for a while. So not using that as the poster child, but there is precedent.
But the likelihood that if you push these 2 years, that we still have the money in 2 years
This is
is,
correct.
is.
It's pretty good.
No, oh, it is good?
No, the likelihood it'll be there,
Just
but
like
the
10.
cost,
The cost
the
goes up.
cost is as well. So there will be a cost, inflationary cost to the project. I'm not trying to talk you into it. I'm just trying to talk,
Yeah, no, I
let you know.
Well,
Obviously.
one other thing it's still not resolved for me is that in our January retreat, we talked about asking for a study related to SS4A, Safe Streets for All, that we likely could find a vendor who would do the study for us, creating a matching fee for the city of not more than $50,000. And I know it appears here as 100,000. But I believe that's only if we spent the full $400,000 award that's available. Is it a 25% matching?
20%.
Are you talking about the SS4A?
Yes.
I believe it was 20%.
So it'd be
Yeah.
up to 100,000 depending on how much we spend.
Right, so,
We have
but I
a- we have
remember
a $500,000 grant.
at some length that
It
to
would
do the
cost
kind of
us.
study, we didn't really think that to get our own CSAP would necessarily require more than maybe 300,000 or.
That is correct, but that is tied to the SS4A money, and we do not have that. There has been no agreement signed. The feds, once again, have closed their blind, and I have not been able to get an agreement. So there is, yes, I agree, we were gonna cut it back and just spend what we needed to do that. But it's 100% if we want to do it on our own right now, because there is no SS4A money available.
Right, well,
So that one's punt, for sure.
Can I clarify something? So if the projects you have planned for this year, 2.2 million, let's be conservative.
Okay.
If we, with the 5th of the 5th, we're anticipating 460,000. You have a $2 million budget, so you have 0.2.
2.1, so you're gonna be up in the 2.5 to 2.6 range.
You might have 300,000.
But out of that,
That's what I'm wondering.
out of that
So
2
that's what
million,
I'm wanting.
out of that $2 million, and Scott can probably help me out here, out of that 2 million, all of these other capital projects that we have, the 50/50 program, the ADA program, all of these things, the striping, all of that comes out of that money as well.
So you really have about 1.8 million for the road
We-
project right now, and it's gonna
if-
cost you about
if that.
2.2.
If that,
I'm good to hang tight and you get further down the road, no pun intended, and you let us know where we sit. And if we have money to pull the trigger on something's great, but I don't think we know today. So I'm good to hold off.
well, okay, I'm great, that's fine. I appreciate that. We've just been spinning our wheels trying to figure out how we can make it work, and no matter how we've looked at it, I can't seem to, something's going to give. There's gonna be one fat project or a bunch of little teeny tiny ones that.
Yeah,
We're gonna get this whole subdivision.
can
done.
one of the things that I was confused on when I looked at this table is it says in one vertical, additional funds required, and it has numbers, and then there's another vertical that says 2025 required costs. And in the case, for instance, of that Highland Drive Trail Phase 3, which is Highland Drive north of Fort Union Boulevard up to the I-215. In one column, it says 25,000, and in the other column, it says 35,000. And so I was under the impression that was gonna be a pretty modest match. That I didn't,
That's
that's the design, that's the 30% design, right?
That's the 30% design. That one is in fact, we received the grant for that.
Uh-huh.
The cost to do the 30%, we went out and talked to different folks, we added from our existing budget now, we added the 25,000 to cover the total contract. So total contract for that is 160, was it? Whatever the two addition
130,000.
plus the 25. or so one
Oh, I
fifty-five.
see. So you're adding.
We've already done that.
That's
You've
already
already
in the
signed that
process.
agreement. That's just to give you information of what we have.
Okay, I think I got it now. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think my only concern is pushing some of these projects back 2 or 3 years, especially those that impact the hillside project. You know, I'm being greedy again. I'm thinking about my
I know.
300 east and other projects like that that would be a significant part of that, but they're very high cost. And we're just gonna continue to pile up these projects and not having even enough in the bucket to get to where we need to be.
I think we have the 2300 East out to, for a grant possibility, right?
That's,
We
Yeah.
did not receive that.
you know,
We
The
did
only
get-
one we received was the intersection. We applied for the other. three
So one of the
projects.
things to add to that, Sean, is our Councilman Newell is the traffic study that we're gonna do.
exactly.
So that's done. So what, do we have that on our?
The intersection 23.
Yes.
We were, well, our discussion was, I don't know if we picked a developer at this point, or am I on the right page?
No, I'm talking about this traffic study.
That's done.
For
The
you,
council, which I think is gonna give Councilman Renewal some of the background of what we're.
the update on
talking
for you.
about, what we
traffic
need to
study
do.
That we still need to schedule for a meeting.
Yeah, we need to schedule. Yes, correct. It's
think-
done. I
I
just
think
need
it's
to
in the,
schedule.
Can't remember. Stuck it
I
on
think,
there.
I think we have it on the.
Are there any
Work with
grants
you.
out there? I think probably not, but that
Oh.
don't have a match, non-existent,
Not anymore, really.
even
No,
like.
you can
okay.
get loans, but
No,
those are
no.
gone, come and gone. The interest rate has changed. You used to be able to get small, I mean, pretty decent rates on loans, but those don't exist anymore.
I would like to request to review that Fort Union Boulevard traffic study. I understand it's slated for a June meeting, but the city paid for that study. As the representative of District 4, I would like to see the study. And then if we discuss it in June, that's great, but I've been anxious to see that now for a few weeks. Is there any reason why that is?
We are finalizing our review on it. It's not ready for publisher we're finalizing, and when we have that, it will go to the council or however the mayor chooses to move that forward.
So we're getting close. Anyway, whether or not you'll have it in a packet probably before that, so. That should happen fairly
Before
soon.
discussion,
What's that?
we'll be able to see it
Yes,
before
yes,
discussion.
100%.
Yeah, it's a discussion item. There's not an adoption to it. It's just informational purposes that y'all would ask for.
But yeah, we'll get it to you before the meeting.
Sure.
Time to review.
Yep.
Well, I think
I agree with Councilor Member Holton. We have to do what we've already said we're gonna do, step into the project, and then we put ourselves in a position where we're waiting for additional revenue that's gonna come from the town center, so we're in a pickle, and we're navigating a couple years of being in a pickle. Why it would be lovely to be able to do some of these things. None of them stand out to me as so critical that they can't be funded because of other obligations and other
The money's not going away. One other thing that I'll add as well, Councilmember Island, is to what Matt was saying. I sit on Transcom, which looks at a lot of the projects that Matt's talking about that get funded. And just so you know, they go back all the time and say, hey, there's been increased costs, so you can increase those grant awards. I sit on the committee that approves those all the time. So even if costs go up, the grants are able to go up.
Correct. Yes, you are. Yeah, we do that all the time at the tech committee.
Yeah.
We'll get the cost requests. We've done that ourselves on a couple of cases.
Right.
I also think we should raise property taxes in District 2 and 3.
They, put them in one.
That's on my-
I'm joking. It's this side of the table, okay? I got you.
Taxation with our representation.
Okay. Well, thanks, Matt. Matt, do you have to turn it up there?
I'm just gonna clip that audio and just say.
I do.
Instead of-
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna clip this audio.
holding pattern.
Here's the
until-
point.
Oh,
But I'll get some information.
This
across
subject
that.
isn't done, yeah.
this summer.
And there should be some extra funds. We'll see.
We'll talk on another, I have something else I need, okay, thank you.
It's not a notice item.
No, it's not.
Let's move on to item, what is now C, which is our flash vote discussion. So Jared, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, so we've got a couple hundred people signed up so far for our pool. And we're still pushing. I think we're on our, maybe more now. I haven't gotten a report recently, but
Remind me how you're getting people to sign up.
so we pushed it out on social. We've sent out to our email list. We sent it out in the newsletter,
Newsletter.
every way we can.
I'm surprised that we only have a couple hundred.
I've asked
Yeah, and I
neighbors
think-
about it and they said, I haven't seen anything, so.
What'll happen too is I think once
There's a QR code in this newsletter.
the first one goes out, so this will go into the discussion too, because we want to talk about the first three. Once the first one goes out, I think it'll trigger more people to sign up as well. And you'll get that pool will continue to grow.
And what kind of number are we striving for? What do we think? What does Splash Vote think will be
400.
represented?
Responses,
And they said 600 is like
In the
a
pool, yeah.
really good number of representative sample. But 400 was.
but it'll continue to grow, so we wanted to talk about what the first three topics we want to cover are. Keeping in mind that first one, maybe not.
Okay, so I'll just pitch this. I think because we won't have a number for the first one, it seems like maybe we should do a satisfaction survey for the first one. I don't want STRs to be the first one because we don't have a big enough pool of people. But definitely one of the first three should be STRs. I hope by the second one. That,
So what would you be
Yeah.
looking for in a satisfaction survey? Because that's what we'll give them is what are we looking for as a result, so that they can then formulate
well, if they
non-biased.
as council members have some suggestions, satisfaction, it's just satisfied are you with city services? Or it could be something we've always talked about how people want whether I'd like to postpone like the walkability and 'cause I want a bigger sample size for that. So the higher the priority, I think, not the first one, let's say that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I'm a little, I was prepared to talk about some that I don't want to put on if we don't have a representative sample either. So,
I think,
Well, and we could even get all six here if we wanted and start.
I don't know.
So the process on this is really important, and I'm just gonna throw something out there. There's 5 of us. There's gonna be 6 surveys. I was gonna propose that we each propose our own topic, and then we let the staff have the 6th survey. What would you like to see? That's just one box. So of course,
So
mine would
yours
be
is
STR.
SPR.
Mine would be STRs.
Well, mine would be intersection safety.
Mine is TBD.
so I really want to get our general plan update started again. So my thought process was engage people to get involved in that through a survey. But so put general plan update.
That would be DVD also, based on a couple of.
Yeah. And I think that if we start with the satisfaction, I want to make sure that these have some, if possible, some deliverables of some kind.
Could we do this?
Make it relevant.
Could we talk as a council during the next couple of weeks and find out what the number is? Cause you said that was a while ago, that they told you 200.
It was a couple weeks ago.
Couple
I know we
weeks
did
ago.
another quick-
There's a QR code.
And the
Next-
QR
the
code
next
is
one or the
the
next?
next.
So let's wait
Current
until
one.
after this,
Yeah,
next newsletter.
and then they were gonna
update.
try to push some things that Flash Vote would also try to.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought they did the initial push, and then if they don't get enough, they start making phone calls
Right.
or sending text messages.
I'd rather not waste one just to, I mean, I don't know. I'd rather get our numbers up to where something's representative and we've got some good data.
Okay.
If possible, is that okay?
Yes,
I don't think we're in a rush.
Well,
right?
pace this is going, we may end up being ahead of it on some STR recommendations. We have that on the May 20th agenda, so. Yeah, I'm okay with that. The whole point is we would like to have some representative, an idea of a broader opinion than just those who come to council. They can be important, but also very narrow. So whatever it takes.
Mike, could
According
we
to
have,
21,
could
whatever
we
it
have
takes.
front desk as residents come in for whatever reason, start saying, hey, would you?
Put a flyer up there.
Start
It put,
pushing it,
not
sure.
just a flyer, but say even have her
Ask.
engage. Or people, hey,
Yeah.
would you?
And no.
There are some flyers up there, but we can ask the staff
Okay.
up there to say, hey, if you're interested in providing
If you're a
feedback, sign up
resident,
here.
this is your
Yeah.
opportunity to give feedback on lots of different issues.
We'll certainly
Can
do
we send
that.
it to our CHBA email list too? Not that everyone who owns a business here doesn't necessarily live here, but if they do live here.
The other thing that we could employ is the citizen committees. Every single citizen committee member on all the different committees, councils and commissions could be given some small little, maybe on a business card that has the QR code and say, you know, within your scope of influence, would you make sure you're, because that would be, you know, you multiply
You could
that out, how
double
many
that.
volunteers do we have? I don't think it should be narrowly CHBA. I think it should be
Yeah.
all those citizen committees.
For every
That-
next committee meeting, they're handed a flyer that they can then.
Right, and they can share,
If Splash Vote's okay with the way we're recruiting people. That is
well,
supposed to be written
well,
up.
we haven't gotten up to the right
I know.
threshold, so I think we need to do more than just. A lot of people don't sign, how many do we have signed up for the emailers? I know,
Porter,
there's-
my husband too, sign up.
a lot of people just don't want to be barraged with all those emails. I mean, I think that's. Nor do they do social media maybe, or that's.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think we've done a really good job of improving our social media presence over the last couple of years. See things listed all the time. I think it's worth, I pay attention to it, but not everybody does.
I think it's better than it was,
It is
for sure.
better.
It's better, but
We have a public noticing email list too. Probably the most subscription.
Yeah.
subscribed to.
Ton of different email, you can subscribe to specific
Yes.
categories and some have,
well, since.
Isn't our greatest number though that?
So-
or news, yeah.
So since two of our council members haven't decided what they want to make their top topic, I know we've talked over the last few years about communications. How do our residents want to be best informed? And I want to see that be one of our surveys out into the future. Because we spend a lot of money on that newsletter, and if we could support Jared and Beatrice to come up with more effective forms of outreach other than that it's a beautiful newsletter. But I have a lot of people, I'll go, what'd you think of Councilmember New Highland's article? It was great. It was on senior, or whatever, oh, I never saw it. Or I'll say, what'd you think of my article? Never saw it. I'm like, well, darn it, so it's problematic in our busy worlds with getting barraged with electronic and all kind of messages, but
Probably a decent one for the first survey too.
at least we could say, if we do a survey, then we can at least come back and say, look, we surveyed the city and now we're trying to meet some of these things.
Okay. Good thoughts. I appreciate that discussion. So we're gonna move on to item D, which is a live work definition. We're gonna turn time to our Community and Economic Development Director, Mike Johnson, who's put a ton of work into this along with the planning commission that's been through that.
Yeah.
And so you've got some recommendations. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, thanks. So you'll recall the moratorium was imposed on live work uses specifically within the neighborhood commercial zone in February. That gives us a maximum 180 days to redefine that.
That was
clarify what
February,
we're
you
saying.
said.
February, mid-February. So we have till
Mid-February.
August
Okay.
at the latest to codify any changes. Otherwise, the moratorium just lifts. We took this, we took an initial shot at just creating a definition for live workspace, which is just some combination of, commercial and residential use. And we, in the definition of live workspace, put some standards in there for how much commercial and, street frontage and things like that, and brought that to the last planning commission meeting. And that led to a pretty good, productive discussion where they suggested, some more substantial changes than that to really get at the root of some of the concerns that they saw going through that previous development application. So what we've done now is, in response to that feedback, prepared an additional list of standards and definitions. We'll bring back to them starting tomorrow night, so they can continue to discuss it. So I'll just share those with you here. I'll start with our ordinance. This has really taken the perspective of following that purpose statement of the neighborhood commercial zone, it's really written as a zone that's supposed to provide, at least in their interpretation of it, and I don't disagree with it, neighborhood scale, commercial uses. And I think the concern there that was raised by the council, by the planning commission, by the public, at that development application is, we saw a project that was very predominantly residential and kind of out of line with that purpose statement. Now, we didn't have standards to define what the purpose statement should mean and how to regulate that, so that's leading to this. But the perspective here is, hey, neighborhood commercial should be a neighborhood scale, commercial oriented uses that fit well within residential areas. So
more commercial than residential?
correct.
Okay.
In response to that, there's a number of uses listed as conditional uses in the neighborhood commercial zone. It's very odd that there are no permitted uses in neighborhood commercial. Probably something we should revisit at some point. Because right now, like the Wells Fargo building, when the bank closed, there's like a title restriction that a financial institution can't be operated there. So to use that property for any purpose, it requires going through some sort of city process. Otherwise, it just kind of sits there. So a little odd, but it may be a problem for the next round of amendments. But anyways, there are a number of uses in the conditional use list that have a residential component. And the planning commission was concerned that if we only focus on rectifying the live work space definition, there's just as likely loopholes in other definitions.
I'm glad they saw that.
Trying now to bring all those together and solve the problem in one go. So we've got these, mixed residential housing, and there's a definition for that, but no standards. And really, if I scroll down, it's this section here. It's a little definition and a picture, which is not super helpful when an actual development application comes in to determine if a project complies with the picture or not. So we have reconfigured that, and then a number of other uses that have a residential component. Home preschool, home business, planned unit development, residential facilities for elderly persons, they all have a connotation of being part of a residential use. So the concern was if we don't address all of these in one kind of go, that someone, if they wanted to do a purely residential product, might propose, hey, this is a residential use. It's a bunch of residential units, but I'm going to do a home preschool in there. In any residential use anywhere in the city, you can do a home occupation. You can do those home business uses. So clarifying this and allowing residential as part of a mixed use type does not preclude those uses from happening because it's part of the residential aspect of it.
Why the bed and breakfast? That one was curious to me because like the Inn on Creek Road, I mean, that's a bed, obviously a commercial use.
Yes, that one is. The last one we saw is a short-term, is an Airbnb that the host stocks the pantry with some snacks and calls it a bed and breakfast. That's in our residential office zone. If the council's okay with that kind of use, that's okay. But what we've seen, the last time that use was used was someone took a house and said, I'm going to use this as a bed and breakfast, and was able to get that entitlement and really stretch the
So for
limit
lack of
bed and
definition,
breakfast.
it could be.
So it should be at least owner occupied or something.
Yeah, well, and
It
what
would
we
be-
said is that the bed and breakfast has to be staffed.
Yeah.
That's kind of the difference.
The whole
And
point.
they said, oh yeah, we'll do that. And, maybe they're doing it, maybe they're not. The definition was a little weak there. So we've just kind of struck it for now. Certainly something that could come back.
Does that mean a bed and breakfast can't be anywhere in the city?
No, it's in, that use is in other zones. I don't know all of them. I know it's in residential office. And again,
Okay.
we could leave it in there, but there is an opportunity there for someone to kind of take advantage of some unintended language. So, and then I'm gonna shift over quickly and show, maybe not. I was gonna show the zoning map. We don't have a ton of neighborhood commercial properties. There are a number over in District 1 by kind of by the Union Park area, just north across Fort Union Boulevard from like Chipotle and Panda Express, like the psychic building and those office
Like with
buildings.
the new dentist office where the bank used to be, is that?
Uh,
example of that?
Chase
The
Bank.
old Chase. Bank.
that's neighborhood commercial, yep. So a few of those properties along there. Good uses of neighborhood commercial, especially that Chase Bank. That was a good reuse of that.
Do we know what that's gonna be, by the way?
It's the orthodontic.
Dental office,
Okay.
yeah. And then some areas, between Highland and 23rd, they're residential properties right now. They have a zoning designation of neighborhood commercial. I think the Farmers Insurance Office, as an example,
yeah.
might be
Cause
that.
it's a home with a garage.
Yep, it's a State Farm office.
Korean guy, good
Yeah.
dude.
Also
And then
the psychic, right? one
The psychic
on-
is, yeah.
Okay.
The town center site, obviously Hillside Plaza is neighborhood commercial. I'm probably missing some. And then the Smiths, the Brighton Point Shopping Center, and obviously the Wells Fargo building.
They're pretty much along main thoroughfares, right?
Yes, but that's really the extent of it. Everything else is regional commercial or something else. As we can continue to talk about form-based code, that form-based code designation, if applied, may even replace some of those neighborhood commercial spaces. So that's all to say that the extent of the neighborhood commercial zone is not far-reaching. We don't see a lot of these. So we had that in mind as well. So I will quickly switch over then to just a review of our recommended changes here.
And this is from planning commission?
This is based on planning commission feedback. They have not seen, we've not discussed these changes with them yet, but are doing that tomorrow.
Gotcha.
But it appears more substantial, and that's the context for why, is because we're trying to clean a number of things up. As I said, the first thing would be to kind of eliminate some of the residential oriented uses that could lead to pure residential projects. You know, maybe not intended by the purpose statement, in the neighborhood commercial zone. And then rather than that mixed residential housing, use that we went over, that's defined by a sentence and a picture, we're proposing a use type that kind of merges all these things together into something called neighborhood mixed use. Different than what you'd see on Fort Union Boulevard, different development standards, you know, more neighborhood oriented, but something that tries to mix all of these different use types together. And neighborhood mixed use would allow residential housing, but only as a component of neighborhood mixed use development.
So
this-
this restaurant underneath and a house. above.
Correct, and they could be separate. The definition right now is they could be separate as part of one project or vertical mixed use. That's open.
This top bullet here, you're saying you want to remove these from,
Yes, from current.
For now, yeah. Now, in a residential component, in a mixed use project, you could have a home office. You can already do that. The concern is someone would build a residential project that's 100% residential and then just say, oh, it's a home occupation. It's
You can
allowed.
operate a preschool
neighborhood
at
commercial.
home and you applied.
I mean, is that, I'm just trying to understand, do we, like, a home preschool, would we not want that?
Not in the zone.
I understand, yeah,
We don't.
just wondering.
I think what we're
why
trying to
those.
avoid is respond to the concern that someone would come in and say, you know, it's a project that looks like, just as the recent example, 8 townhomes. But they say, no, this complies. This isn't just residential because there's going to be a preschool in one of them. So the whole project is eligible.
Okay,
The intent in mixed use is you have in this neighborhood mixed use zone is you have a clear neighborhood scale commercial element. You can have a residential component and I'm fine, you know, if we still allow home offices, home preschools within the residential component of one of these mixed use projects. But I think we're trying to just eliminate the potential that someone will just propose a residential project
to get something.
call it a
else.
home preschool. Yeah.
So, okay, I'm just trying to wrap my arms around this. So you're saying that in neighborhood commercial, there could be preschools, but not home preschools?
Yeah, because you have a commercial element, you could operate a commercial preschool. That, I believe that's on that use list in neighborhood commercial.
So maybe you have a childcare facility, you know, at the main floor
Yeah.
and that you live above.
Absolutely.
That, so that would be preferred to like somebody building a residential home, like in the Wells Fargo example.
Yeah,
They build a big home and they say, oh, but I'm just gonna do this in a little preschool in my basement for a little bit. It would be better in this neighborhood mixed, correct me if I'm wrong, this mixed neighborhood area, you want it to be a preschool. And then maybe there's a
a
residential.
little bit of residential.
That's the intent.
So remind me,
Yeah.
I should know this off the top, but so how many square feet in an acre?
Or 43,000.
43,000. So you're talking about minimum lot size of roughly a quarter of an acre.
Well, I'll get to that because we're proposing some changes there too.
Okay,
As part of replacing all of these with this neighborhood mixed use definition, we've crafted a definition that we'll see if the planning commission what they think of it. But it's similar to the existing mixed use definition, single building containing more than one type of land use, at least one of which is residential, or a single development of more than one building in use, one of which is residential, where different types of land uses are in close proximity, planned as a unified, complementary whole, functionally integrated to the use of shared vehicular and pedestrian access and parking areas. That kind of concept, if you look at the Smiths across the street, or frankly, even, it's a little different, but the town center site, you have different areas of a huge project and they all operate as one thing. You could have residential over here, commercials over here, you've got open space in the middle, shared access, shared parking, it's all one project. That'd be horizontal mixed use. Like functionally where we'd see that at any point in the city is probably the Brighton Point Shopping Center, if that ever redevelops. And then the planning commission was also concerned, and this is a valid point that they brought up, of adding standards into the actual definition. We had tried to just create a definition that said, hey, a live work project has to have 25% ground floor area commercial. They said they'd be more comfortable if you just define that at its base level of what neighborhood mixed use is, and then adopt standards for what that means elsewhere in the ordinance. So that's what the direction we're headed now. We're basically saying, the development standards are the same as any other neighborhood commercial building or development. And they're already pretty well calibrated, where if they're adjacent to residential, the setback is greater. The height in neighborhood commercial is the same height as R18 in any residential zone, it's 35 feet. And if you're adjacent to residential, you have to maintain actually a greater setback than if it were a single family home. So we feel it's reasonable to adopt the same standards for building height, setbacks. And the neighborhood commercial has landscaping, lot coverage, other standards on top of that even a home doesn't have. The mix of uses, you can have a residential component, but the commercial element has to be one of those other uses within the NC zone. Pretty straightforward. And then this is the point of making sure the mix is accurate without getting too overly prescriptive. The non-residential portion of a project shall constitute at least 25% of the total gross floor area of the entire unit or project. And at least 50% of the unit or project frontage at ground level should be along a public right of way and dedicated to that commercial use. That's so you don't hide an office in the back and call it a day. It's street fronting, it's along the public interface. And then these are kind of ancillary changes we're proposing, and similar to what our mixed use zone says. Right now, a neighborhood commercial project or the zone requires a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet, a minimum lot width of 60 feet, a minimum depth of 90 feet. In practice, especially in your shopping centers, you see property owners go in there and subdivide for ownership and parking and lease rates and stuff. Sometimes this creates some arbitrary subdivisions where they're drawing lines in this funky way just to meet that standard and no other reason. We are recommending, and our mixed use zone does this right now, we've never had any issues with it, but there's no minimum lot size or dimensional requirements. You just have to meet all the development standards. And that's going to pretty well take care of seeing a development on a really weird or unintended lot, because you've got pretty substantial setbacks and building heights, access and parking and landscaping and all that stuff. And by the time you design your project to account for all that, you're taking up 7,000.
We have minimum building sizes.
Coverage, lot coverage. I think it's 50% footprint
Lot
coverage.
Okay.
And then in neighborhood commercial, yes, I do think, Mayor, for certain uses like office, medical, dental office, you have a maximum footprint size. I think it's like 7,500 square feet.
Okay.
The current ordinance also says building height is a maximum of 2 stories or 35 feet, whichever is less. We are proposing to clean that up and just say it's 35-foot max. If you can fit 3 levels within 35 feet, great. If it's 2 levels, great. If it's 1, I think it's just that overall height impact. Couldn't think of a good reason to keep the 2 in there.
Yeah.
So that's what we're taking back to the planning commission tomorrow, and why, but trying to orient this more towards, that actual neighborhood commercial use and meet that purpose statement.
That makes sense.
After they make a recommendation, which will probably happen in June, this will come back to you for formal consideration.
July, which gives us, we're ahead of.
Yeah, we have till mid-August, so we're on schedule.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mike. That wasn't too bad. Okay, the last staff report, and this doesn't make me take long, and I'm glad Matt's here. So I want to give you some background of why this is here. This is, I was driving up, getting up our freeway exit of Union, of 20th East rather. And saw the awful UDOT part where there's just weeds and looks awful, and then you hit ours and then you see the little grass, but you don't notice a whole lot. The sign's over there. If you're stopped, maybe you look over and you see our sign. Matt had
I made the joke that if we sent code enforcement to some of our spots, we'd get a ticket.
there's some places that he's not wrong.
Especially the medians.
Yeah, the medians are hard. They're hard. I mean, I can only imagine how hard they are to maintain. It's a median in the middle of the road.
So this is the big point that I wanted to make. I don't want this to be a big ticket item at all. What I thought was, I would love for people to get off the freeway and somehow, whether it's through flowers, I think as soon as flowers bloom, we should have, flowers don't cost that much money. Flower gardens that lead up to maybe even a better visual, you're in Cottonwood Heights. We have our boundary on the west with Midville, and we have the little median. I know that there's not water in that, is that right? I think there should be. I think Midville would be happy to maybe, hopefully, but I can talk to him, Matt.
I had lunch with the mayor.
And
recently
he
on
was open.
definition.
I've already, yeah.
He's gung ho and
I think we could do some cool things to make people know without spending a lot of money that you're in a city that cares and that's about, looks and flowers aren't that much money to me. Whatever we put in there, I know it would require a little bit of effort.
I think
I was just gonna say, I'm almost on Councilor Rundle, you can even go. The entrance coming from 13th East by Home Depot. I know we have grass there, which would be easy to put, a lot of flowers and color and something to let people know, oh, I'm in Cottonwood Heights. I mean, anyway, so I wanted to get the thought process of what you thought, if this is something that's important to you. Like I said, I don't want it to be a big ticket item, Matt, I know putting some water into that median, I know would be a little bit of an expense. If we could share it with Midville, that'd be great. And then, but I'm talking flowers, some flower gardens, and then the efforts to weed and do that. So anyway,
Water does exist in the median, it just hasn't been, it's not connected or it broke.
Oh,
So
good.
It's.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in the background on this one, so.
Okay,
so. This is a real passionate thing for me, and it also aligns with our sustainability goals. And that is that our city strive for water-wise landscaping, use of native plants. Native plants can be beautiful. They can be colorful. So remember the slogan, friends don't let friends plant annuals. No, I'm kidding, but I love colorful flowers too. But I think, again, we could align with our sustainability goals. Some members of the community recently helped me with an initiative to put mulching around the pine trees on SR 210 that are on the east side of the road. And there is a program that you can get mulching product for almost free. I think this would be, well, it has danger to it because it's located in the median. So I'm not saying we can have our citizens with their shovels and rakes in the middle of our arterials. But on the other hand, this would be an opportunity to align with, again, our sustainability goals we have in the city, to plant native plants that are water wise, that only require watering in their first couple of years to initiate them. And then they grow. And why not make a statement that we truly, align with our master plans and do something like that versus planting colorful annuals that require a lot more work every year and expense. Whereas native plants, again, they contribute. So
I appreciate that. Matt, did you have something you wanted to say before we got into our discussion?
Well, I'm just gonna say, I'm meeting next week with the director over there as well as the parks for Midvale. I'm talking about the medians now.
Yeah.
And we have that meeting. They have our agreement in hand for the shared costs. We have an existing agreement. it kind of fell through the cracks a little about last year or so. One thinking one and one thinking the other, but they have the agreement. We meet next week to discuss what we're doing in there. We'll come back to you with a proposal. We have some ideas that would, I definitely agree. We need to do something with our entrances. One of the reasons I wanted to do Highland here, coming off the freeway on Highland. I don't think we should look that way, to be honest with you. I think we should be better than that. And that's what I'm hoping for. So we pulled the trees out that were dead on 13 coming off the freeway because the water was not connected. So I have an agreement with them that I'll replant the trees as soon as they hook the water back up, and we're moving forward with some of those things.
Awesome.
And
Can we separate this though too, because what Sandy does, which I agree with you, is they are trees and then lavender, and lavender is native. And so that's a much bigger scale project that should 100% not be annuals. But if we plant some annuals and perennials and maybe, you know, some native shrubs and a tree, that's still beautiful too. And then you're only doing a small number of annuals every year, but that does require constant watering. So
But we already have water there for the grass. And get a
Yeah.
couple of.
I think this lives within the spirit of us wanting to really jump in, both feet in on focusing on our existing infrastructure or our existing kind of footprint and doing it really well. We're going to get a better bang for a buck. And I think we're going to do our residents a better service by really doing the things that we have really, really well. So I'd be fully supportive. I think it's a great idea.
civic pride.
Councilmember Newell.
I'm a little biased. I'm kind of with Councilmember Burrell. I'm just starting the year 2 of a wildflower patch in my front yard. The flowers are gorgeous. They're perennials. They don't need much water because, you know, I think one of our responsibilities is to practice what we preach. You know, we're talking about the reduction on bonds and so forth, the new buildings. I never had a sprinkler system. And you can drive by my yard, it's absolutely green. July, it'll be a little different, but
springtime looks great.
yes,
Right.
but it also, it doesn't die off. But it allows us, if we use perennials, if wildflowers here in Utah are gorgeous. Once this patch is done, I'm gonna use it to push my neighbors to do the same thing.
I don't have a big opinion on the design, other than I think we need to do something.
Yeah,
So
I just think it has, we have an opportunity. We have a great opportunity.
Yeah.
do we have an amount in mind?
I think we could do a mix as well. What's that?
Do we have an amount?
I mean, we're talking honestly pennies.
Yeah.
You know, so Matt, I mean,
It's not the issue is, it's not the cost. I mean, quite honestly, we can't cover what we're talking about within the existing operating budget. I mean, yeah, with a couple of thousand we're gonna pull out. It's the shared responsibility with our neighbor who also has to buy in on what we're
That's the
doing.
Walmart section,
That's the
right?
Walmart and 7-Eleven kind of in between the two
Right
items.
in there,
15 to.
215 all the way to
Yeah.
Creek Road.
Yeah.
Is the shared,
That's right.
shared island, which is, it's not, honestly, it's not that big of a deal. As far as what we put in there, it's the agreement on the shared maintenance and or cost, because the agreement now is Midvale. That I'm not disparaging Midvale. Sorry if you think I am. I'm not disparaging them. I'm just saying they are responsible for the maintenance of whatever we decide to put in. As far as our contract is concerned. I've gonna propose something else to them, that we kind of split the maintenance. We'll take the entrance coming in off the freeway, a few things that way. I think we can make it work. I just need the agreement to be signed. And we're doing that next week.
again, we can do this year, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
So
The
like
intention, honestly, the intention has been, we will start on this in the next month.
Okay,
To get things in the ground. Trees, not always the best time to plant them if we're waiting too much longer for the summer. Now's the best time for us to plant them. I was kind of seeing what we had left over from the tree sale.
we still have some, don't we?
We have some trees, so we have these things. We understand, we know we have an issue. We're just pushing forward and trying to cross our i's and dot our t's along the way.
Okay.
In that order.
Okay. So Great.
But my question would be, because when I do meet with them, I mean, I've heard some different things, water wise. Some annuals, some perennials.
Not in those medians. Those medians, to me, I would just propose that we mimic what happens as you're coming out of Sandy, which is trees, the lavender, so it's native
Some
plants.
color.
it's- And, you know, lavender is beautiful.
But
The thing with,
the-
the thing with perennials,
islands,
they
though.
don't all
Okay.
bloom at the same time, so if
You can, you
I
can,
agree.
you can get
You
desert
can-
shrubs
right,
that
wait,
are
let me
so
finish.
colorful.
Please let me finish. That you can go and get perennials that bloom every 2 to 3 weeks, so you always have something. So I guess the whole point is, we want not to be the broken window city, we want to be one of the Pacific Pride, and that will elevate a lot. Other.
Glad to hear you say it. That's great. We will get it done.
So kind of both. We were
will.
looking for waterways, but I think exactly what Councilor.
We will get it done.
Okay, awesome. No offense, but we're gonna judge it. No, we're gonna,
Judge your way.
no.
It won't be the first time.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, council. Okay, quickly, a quick review of calendar and upcoming events. We have our, on May 21st from 1:30 to 2:30, our senior social will be doing bingo again, and that's here at City Hall. Friday, June 6th from 9 to 12 is a free community shredding event here at City Hall. Encourage everybody to take advantage of that. Saturday, June 7th from 9 to 12 is a Utah Recycling Alliance event at Hillside Plaza. Mike, are you doing in that?
That's it's the second, that's that hard to
Same group
recycle
that did it
event. It's
before.
the same event,
When is that gonna be?
June 7th.
And it's at Hillside.
Well, they're gonna do it at Hillside Plaza,
Okay.
have more space for
Very
cars to drive in there.
Love it.
June
Love it.
7th, is that on the calendar already, the city
I
calendar?
think, yeah, Mayor.
Yeah,
correct.
great.
Yeah.
Wednesday, June 11th.
June
then-
7th.
I think it's a Saturday.
June 7th.
The shred event's the 6th, and then the
Yeah,
recycle
the
7th.
shred event is here on the Friday and then the next day. We try to get them together, but one wants a weekend, the other doesn't, so they're back to back.
And then the senior social in June is Wednesday, June 11th from 1:30 to 2:30, and that's here at City Hall. I don't know if we have an event planned yet. And then Wednesday, June 11th as well, from 6:30 to 8, we have a suicide prevention training at City Hall. But registration is required via our city website, and it's gonna be limited to 30 participants. So if you know somebody that would be interested, let them know. And then Butler Grove Days coming soon, July 24th to July 26th. We probably ought to get on the calendar our delegation. Is that from Korea as well? For next time. Anyway, we do have some items to discuss in a closed meeting pertaining to property acquisition. Anything else? This property acquisition. And yeah. And so I'm trying to think what that's gonna be labeled under. There's nothing really there that will describe that, but anyway, we're gonna just say we're going into it for property acquisition and confidential financial data. Yeah, there we go. And so if I could get a motion to leave our work session and enter into a closed session at the end of our closed session to end our work session.
What he said.
A second to what I said.
I'll second to what
Okay,
you
all in
said.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys.
So we can grab